In 1315, Scotland's King Robert the Bruce decided to lay siege to England's Carlisle Castle. Robert expected a swift victory, but his men arrived to find a relentless downpour. Struggling against muck and mud, they tried to fill the moat with corn husks, only for the husks to float away. Then Robert ordered the construction of a massive siege tower, but the English responded with wooden scaffolds that heightened the castle walls. Their final push to scale those walls ended with English arrows raining down on the sodden Scots. At a time when sieges could last months or even years, Robert retreated after just 11 days. This siege is a prime example of how medieval European castles could stand firm against enemy onslaughts. But castles weren't just for passive defense. They were symbols of power, private residences, and hubs of governance intended to impress and intimidate. In fact, they were just as likely to be used for offensive military tactics. Castles regularly served as bases for launching attacks and as a way to control local populations with promises of shelter or threats of violence. While citadels and fortified palaces could be found as early as the 8th century BCE, European castles, as we think of them, started appearing in large numbers in the late 9th century CE. At this time, the ruling Carolingian Empire was breaking down, and as the monarch's control over his 1 million square kilometer realm disintegrated, nobles began building castles to solidify their regional power. These early wooden castles followed the Motte and Bailey design, featuring a central tower built atop a steep mound with a walled yard at the base. But over the following centuries, as castles became centers of social, cultural, military, and political life, their designs grew more varied and complex. By the 12th century, many wooden Motte and Baileys had been rebuilt with stone, increasing their defense and longevity. Subsequent castles built in stone from the start used curtain walls and gatehouses to enclose the castle yard. And their walls and towers were often coated in a layer of protective limewash, covering their stony grey with a range of colourful tones. Alongside their scale, visual beauty was a way for castles to project power. Castle Caernarfon in northern Wales was built with bands of different coloured stone, and Crusader armies building castles in the Middle East often incorporated elements of intricate Islamic and Byzantine architecture. But as European castles became more widespread, so did technologies to defeat them. Fire had long threatened wooden Motte and Baileys, and while their stone counterparts were more resistant, their underlying wooden structure was still vulnerable to arson. Battering rams cracked castle doors, siege towers and mining operations thwarted castle walls, and trebuchets launching stones up to 130 kilograms endangered entire structures. Rectangular castle towers were especially vulnerable since their square corners had fewer load-bearing stones. Fortunately, when the Crusaders returned to Europe from the Middle East, they brought home architectural innovations, including the design for concentric castles. Featuring numerous rings of defensive walls around a central tower, this approach created a circular fortress with multiple layers of siege security. From the 13th century onward, this design reigned supreme, even standing up to the small cannons that had begun spreading across Europe. But by the 15th century, the high towers that once rained arrows on attackers became easy targets for powerful new cannons. While castle builders adapted by making squatter structures with walls up to 3 meters thick, this kind of construction was prohibitively expensive. By the early 16th century, most local nobles couldn't keep up with the costs and became reliant on strong, centralized rulers who could afford to support modern defenses and large standing armies. This financial and political pressure, alongside advances in gunpowder weapons, put an end to castles' military dominance. Most of these fortresses were converted to residences, administrative centers, or prisons, and today many still serve as tourist attractions and private estates. But while they no longer protect their inhabitants from sieging armies, they still project the grandeur and authority that made medieval castles so effective for centuries. If you enjoy learning about history, subscribe to this channel, because the lessons of yesterday can help us face the challenges of today.